Alex here with a high conflict child custody video on religion. I'm not talking about the parents' religion. I'm talking specifically about what to do, or what ends up happening is more appropriate. What ends up happening in a child custody conflict when both parents have different religions and they want to impose those religions on the child even though they're different, or maybe one parent's like an agnostic atheist or a Gnostic atheist and the other parent isn't, and that parent wants the other parent to be forced to sort of subject the child to the religion that they chose. This topic can get so crazy. A lot of people will fall back on, well, this is the religion we were practicing when we were together. So since that's what we were practicing when we were together, we should continue that throughout the child's life into adulthood. It's not that simple, and here's why. Sometimes families get together and start, they worship a religion, and then something happens at some point in their life and the family decides to stop, or they decide to not go as often or practice what are the words, practice the religions, traditions as often as they used to, or they just flat out abandon religion altogether and become an atheist family or whatever. This is normal. This happens in life. People might start one way and change their mind and want to do something different. Some people fall back on, well, the child loves the religion, and so the other parent is being selfish by not allowing the child to practice the religion. It's not that simple either, because as I've talked in a lot of my other videos, when it's a high conflict case, a high conflict child custody case, that child may not actually want to practice the religion. Rather, the parent, the high conflict parent, personality disorder parent, is manipulating and controlling the child using the various different control mechanisms that I've mentioned. For an example, watch the video Alienation and Abuse and take all of that and basically apply it to what I'm talking about here. It's not so easy. Just because a child says to one person that they like their religion doesn't mean the child will say to the other parent that that's not true, or to another person that that's not true, or to a psychologist or to a judge. It's because in these high conflict cases, the child is being pulled back and forth, or, well, hopefully there's a good parent who isn't actually engaging in tug of war with the child, who's actually more of a release valve. But before both parents are aware, often it can become a tug of war situation, and the child may not be able to express themselves, especially if they're not well into the teenage years. So what I've heard the courts do, this is my understanding, it didn't happen in my case because this actually was never an issue in my case. What I have heard from many different people is that the courts will typically order the parents to practice whatever religion they want with their child when that child is in their custody. If that happens to be two different religions, so be it. If that happens to be that the religion is practiced with one parent and not at all with the other because the other one's an atheist or something, so be it. Some people will complain that certain religions have specific, what's the word, traditions and such that may have to happen on certain days at certain times or something like that, and that it's not fair that the other parent doesn't practice those with the child during their time. When in that case, it's too bad, so sad, because uh, the tricky thing here is both of the parents have parental rights. Both of the parents have the right to practice religion, and both of the parents have the right to take their kid to certain religious institutions or practice certain traditions consistent with that parent's desires. And the problem is that one parent can't just say, my rights are the only ones that matter, to hell with yours. It's a sucky situation that just cannot be, there's no easy answer to. Now, there are some cases where people will agree at like a settlement conference, or they'll enter a stipulation or something. They'll agree to a certain religion that the child is going to practice. And that can really turn into a catastrophe unless it's a high conflict child custody case, because if it's a high conflict child custody case, it'll turn into an outright living hell. I have heard examples of high conflict people who have never practiced a religion all of a sudden starting to practice it and trying to force the other parent to subject the child to the religious traditions. And I have heard also of those exact parents choosing the religion that is the most day to day. So there's some religions that really you only have to, go to one event or something once a week. And there's other religions that you may have to engage in a ritual 5 times a day. I don't really know. I mean, I know a lot about different religions, and the reason I'm not naming them is not because I'm like worried, because I'm not really bashing religion. The reason I'm not naming them is because I'm not really 100% sure that I know exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to all these different religions, because I don't know all the different little details. But anyway, the high conflict X in this particular case that I'm thinking about chose a religion that they weren't practicing at all, that all of a sudden now there's a high conflict child custody case open and the court's processing, or it's getting processed through the litigation I don't know exactly what's going on in the specific case. All I know is that this parent has specifically chosen the religion, or a religion, that requires the other parent, or that requires the child to do certain traditions multiple times a day, every day. And now that high conflict parent is exploiting that, and they're sending text messages to the other parent, make sure they do this, don't forget it's this time, don't forget it's this time. They're sending emails, they're sending text messages 4 or 5 times a day, and now they're able to do it under the pretext of, well, I'm just helping the child practice the religion. In this particular case that I'm thinking of, I'm not sure if parties stipulated to the child being subjected to a religion, or subjected, I hate using that word, the child participating in a religion. So they probably will be able to fall back on what I mentioned earlier and get the court to address the issue and tell that other parent to just knock it off and practice that during their time if that's what they want. But I do know that in some cases where some parents have settled, that that parent ends up getting pretty much arm twisted throughout the process, or throughout the arm twisted into having the child participate in the religion for the the remainder of the child's growth into adulthood. I'm sure that parent could make an issue of it and take it to court and say they changed their mind and they don't believe in the religion anymore, but that's going to cost money. It's going to be stressful. If they hire an attorney, it's going to cost a whole lot of money, and they may not even win. And if they just decide to just stop taking the child to religious events or practice whatever religious traditions they're supposed to, now they're going to be subjected to contempt of court motions. In fact, it's almost the exact same problem that I bring up in my video, right of refusal. Please watch the video right of refusal, because it's almost the exact same type of mentality that you're going to end up having to deal with. It's just going to end up being converted into a weapon, and it's just going to be used to make, it's going to be exercised as obnoxiously as possible to frustrate you, and it ends up, like I said in the video right of refusal, it ends up turning into contempt of court motions. I recommend, here I am at the end of the video, I really recommend not agreeing to have the child participate in a specific religion. Even if you agree with that religion right now, you don't know what it's going to turn in 2 years down the line. You don't want the other parent, I don't think it needs to be reduced to a court order. I think that people can work together if they're not high conflict parties on this issue. If 2 parties get along, it's just like I said in right of refusal. Don't reduce it to a court order. Go ahead and just work together on the religious traditions and taking the child to religious events. Coordinate and cooperate. But there may be a time that comes when one person just decides they don't believe it anymore, or they've changed their mind, or they don't want to practice it as strictly as they used to. And people are within their right to do that. There's no place that you register in the United States, I want to be this religion, and now you're stuck like that for the rest of your life. And the same goes for raising children and subjecting or having the children participate in the religious process. And the same goes in child custody cases when 2 parents split up and they're not together anymore. One of them may change their mind. So, I mean, it's not right to force the other person to participate in that religion if they just don't want to anymore. And because you both share a common child, it's the same situation. It's not right for the court to get involved and now force that child to participate in that specific religion. I don't think that that happens. I haven't heard of that happening, with the exception of somebody signing a stipulation or agreeing at a settlement conference, and then it ends up getting stuck in a court order. And good luck fixing it, now that things have changed, or if things change in the future, good luck fixing that, because it can become, from what I've seen in some of the examples that I've heard where there's parents sending the other parent messages 3 or 4 or 5 times a day. It amounts to harassment when it's that often. In a high conflict case, that's what's going to happen. I stand by what I've said previously, that high conflict people, they're not just addicted to the conflict. They define who they are. Their identity and the conflicts sort of become conflated or grafted together, and they see anything as an opportunity to increase and maintain the conflict. So if you are with a high conflict X, this is exactly what's going to happen with this issue, just like with right of refusal. I really don't know what else I can cover in this video. It was a difficult video for me because I didn't personally go through this issue with my ex. So I did the best that I could, and understanding high conflict X's, I do not recommend agreeing to participate in religion throughout the child's life, or throughout the child going into adulthood. I don't recommend it, at least not through court order. If you want to work together on that out, unofficially, fine, but don't bind yourself to something like that, because you don't know how far it can, you have no idea just how crazy it can get with a high conflict X. And with the case that I'm thinking about right now, I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes a court issue. If the person is bound by an order, I wouldn't be surprised if it turns into a contempt of court issue. Just like right of refusal ends up turning into contempt of court filings all over the place, the same thing can happen here. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this video, and I'll see you guys next time.